Good evening and welcome to University of Wisconsin-Madison. I am Missy Neergaard, the Director of Sustainability at Madison. What I want to talk to you today about is organizational change management. And I'm going to come at it from the perspective of a project that we're doing here on campus to capture space particles. So in many regards, this is a cosmic presentation. And I'm not going to get into the details of neutrino particles, one, because I don't understand them, but I do want to talk about how we situate the campus to work together, transdisciplinary, with our private partners to get a school in Wisconsin to build a laboratory in the South Pole. And our observatory in the South Pole is pretty unique. It has hundreds of mile-deep bores into the ice shelf in which we place thousands of sensors that can capture these space particles. And the concept of how you get an institution of higher education to coordinate through that process is very much what I'm trying to do with our sustainability program on campus. University of Wisconsin-Madison is a 170-year-old campus, very much renowned for its sustainability alumni in its programming. We're the founders of Earth Day. Yet there is no campus-wide sustainability program. And when we talk about organizational systems and structures, particularly in higher education, we think about different silos. And I'll use the word silos several times throughout this presentation. And really it is just a compartmentalized system. There's a lot of autonomy in higher education. So to be able to work through some of these structures, we tend to graphically present them. And some of the more typical presentations or graphic representations of an organizational structure that we see are some of these hierarchical systems. And you'll see this on our front-facing web page as well. We have our chancellor, our vice chancellors, our deans, our associate vice provosts, our associate vice chancellors, etc., all the way down. When I first got here, the executive leadership described this organization to me as the flattest organization they've ever worked in. So what does that mean to be a flat organization? Well, in some regards, it's great because it provides a lot of autonomy. It requires consensus building, so it takes a long time to get things done. And a problem, especially if you're going to be building an observatory in the South Pole, is that there isn't a very clear delineation of lines of authority. Who do I need to go to get approval to do this, to negotiate an international treaty, to buy something, to contract out with engineers while we're using our own engineers? It's a very complex process to build these international research initiatives, and it's even more complex when you work within a flat organization. So there are other models for organizational structure, and some of these I found to be quite cute. And I like to add humor into just about everything we do, so this makes it good for us. So we also have this, what's described as a sphere of silence. Now, the sphere of silence is those points of connection in the university where you know you can go to get something done. It's not a high-profile position. It's not necessarily a high-profile person. But you know that if you go to Janie in research and sponsored programs, she's going to be able to get you the information you need or run you through a process that you need to get something done. So Janie is great. But what happens when Janie leaves? There's an incongruity into some of our organizational processes that gives us opportunities as we work through this methodology that I'm going to present to you to help us find our way and navigate through typically flat organizations that we find in higher education. Another of the examples that I've really grown to like is this ball of yarn. Because yarn has a start, it has an end, and if you've ever tried to unravel Christmas tree lights or balls of yarn, you know those ends can be pretty hard to find, and then they're all jumbled up in this mass. And I think the analogy that's most apropos in higher education is that that ball of yarn gets swatted around between all these compartmentalized organizations. Well, we don't know that we can approve that over here, so you go over here, or we need to build a committee for this, and It really does remind me of a cat playing with a toy. Some of the other organizational representations that we get are the silos. We see that a lot, and there was a recent article in the Chronicle of Education that described the silos, but they said they're leaky silos. We can squeezle our way out and go make a touch point over here. We find ways to work together. Is it the best organizational model? No, but that's what we have. So that's what we work with. And then, of course, we have this amoeba type gelatinous mass where there are no definitive edges. It's sloggy to work through, and it's time intensive. So when we try to implement a campus-wide program like sustainability or diversity and equity, we want everyone on board with a mutual purpose and an understanding of what we're doing. We take our organizational structures and we then have to deal with the real organization of people. When we play with all our little squares and circles and connections and lines, they look great on paper, and we introduce people, and it becomes a messy reality. And this is the reality of what we have to work through. So while we're looking at these real organizational charts, this is where it goes back to that sphere of silence things. How do I actually get through the organization with the personalities, the competencies, and the skill sets that are in place within that organization? And this is where one of the examples of our cosmic ray, what are those called? Cosmic Ray Observatory comes really neat. So they provide this example of a neutrino particle coming in and hitting one of our sensors and then moving through that sensor array. This to me is an excellent representation of how we get things done at a university. We come in, we touch a sensor, and then through that sensor, we are able to negotiate through the other sensors. And eventually, you can see a map of what our trajectory was and how we need to accomplish that particular program. And that doesn't always necessarily translate into how we describe it. So if I were here and I'm telling you that I have created a sustainability program for the University of Wisconsin-Madison, we're going to go from point A, where there is no campus-wide program, to point B, where there is a campus-wide program, and it's amazing, and it's the best in the institution, and we had our strategic goals, and we did A, B, C, and D, and it was beautiful. And I'll go to conferences, and I'll write papers, and I'll talk about that strategic plan, how it was implemented, and how we got from point A to point B. And it seems like it's a very linear process. And that is a lie, because in reality, we all work within this mess, this nasty ball of yarn that we affectionately refer to as the squiggle. And I'm going to give all the credit in the world to a colleague at Harvard, Leith Sharp, who developed this framework for helping to clarify what it is that we do and how we work through organizational change management. So in this squiggle, we start out on our path to get to point B. We take a few steps forward, we take 3 steps back, sometimes we fall off a cliff and then we have to go back up a hill. It is a messy, messy process. But what we can do within this process is map our trajectory. And I think that is a valuable piece of it. So I'm going from point A to point B. I'm in it for a couple months. I take a point in time and I stop and I look back. And this is called forensic mapping. And in this process, I say, all right, my strategic goal was to do X. And I'm this far in that process to do X. I'm going to look back and identify which processes, which policies, and which people either enabled or disabled my process. Where were my acceleration points? Where were my deceleration points? Where were my roadblocks? And I'm going to identify those. And then I'm going to use that model and that framework to look forward, and I'm going to forward map. And eventually, as I do this throughout my organization and throughout my process, I'm going to be able to refine my trajectory, and I will still have a squiggle. The squiggle never goes away, but I'll have less of a squiggle. And then what I need to make sure to do, because we're in higher education and we need to share what we learn, we need to build upon what we do, I cannot come back out and tell you that I got from point A to point B. I need to delve into that squiggle with you, and we all need to do that. We need to dive into the squiggle and share share what we're doing, because I'm very much confident that a lot of the projects and programs that we're implementing at University of Wisconsin-Madison are similar programs or not exact programs to what you're doing. Now, are the policies, systems, personnel different? Absolutely. Can we still use those same methodologies? Are we still going to possibly run into a same legal issue? Yes, and particularly so in a university system. So a lot of the legal hurdles that I'm facing at UW-Madison, all of my system schools are going to be facing that as well. So when we get together and we collaborate and we've identified what those what the implications of those laws are as far as inhibiting the growth of our programs, we can get together and work on that in a more unified and intentional approach. So then we can go to our legislators, we can go to our campus lobbyists and our chancellors, and we can talk about, all right, this is a hurdle. It's not just a hurdle for us, it's a hurdle for all of us. Or we can say, oh my gosh, I found this, this amazing program, I didn't know it was available, this really helped me do X. And then I can share that with my colleagues at the other system schools and say, hey, there's this pool of grant money available. You might want to apply for it. And this is what we were able to do with it. Which leads me then back to how we actually work through our organizational systems. So in our hierarchical systems, we call this the command control system. And it is those linear approaches. And this system is important. It helps us identify who are our approvers. Where can we go to get an answer? This is critical. But what we don't have with that hierarchical system is what we call the adaptive control system or adaptive operating system. And what this is, and I'm using, it's adaptive, but I'm using molecular models to demonstrate the adaptability and the flexibility. So if I'm doing project X, I'm going to need a different molecular structure within our organization to accomplish that. If I'm doing Y, I may need to adapt that molecule. I may need to pull off this component and bring in this component. And that's how we get stuff done on campus. So using these models of moving through the organization, as I'm forward mapping and forensic mapping, I can identify all those little pieces and components that change the structure of our system depending on what we need to do. It's an adaptive, very flexible, and pretty nimble approach to getting things done through an organization. And what that allows us to do is use our squiggles to do some really amazing things, to capture those cosmic rays that are on a linear trajectory through space. And in our ice cube neutrino observatory, what had to happen was, one, we had to come up with a technology to bore a mile deep into the ice sheet. And we contracted with a company just outside of Madison that developed a process, because there's no materials in Antarctica, right? Everything we do, we have to bring in. They developed a machine that takes ice, melts it down, turns it into steam, and all of these mile-deep bores are steam-derived. Then we had to build the sensors. Then we had to get all of the treaties and approvals and everything to do this research and the funding. This is a huge, complex process, and we were able to get it done. And what it enables us to do is to capture the trajectory, of these ice cube neutrinos. We can capture them as they're going through the sensors. And this organizational methodology and this framework for studying how we move through systems has very similar applications. So take some time, explore your squiggle, see what you can get out of it, and thank you all for being here today. I very much enjoyed my time with you.